In 2007, Lehman Brothers wasn't just a bank. It was a 158-year-old monument to financial power, seemingly at the absolute peak of its game. And yet, just 1 year later, it became the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. This is the autopsy of that collapse. Our investigation is going to start with the firm's final, incredibly confident words to the world.
You know, this statement from CEO Richard Fuld, right there in the 2007 annual report, it wasn't just corporate fluff. This was a declaration of strength. It was meant to project an image of an institution that believed it was completely bulletproof. And honestly, if you just looked at the numbers, you'd probably believe him.
For fiscal year 2007, Lehman reported a record net income of over $4 billion. This was the data point they held up as the ultimate proof that their strategy was working. This number screamed success.
And yet, just 9 months after publishing that record profit, the firm was gone. Wiped out. This catastrophic failure, well, that's the central paradox of our entire case today. A declaration of invincibility, record-breaking profits, and then total, complete system failure. So, to answer this, we've got to look beyond the official story. Our analysis needs to peel back the layers of this supposed success to really understand the underlying sickness. How did a structure that looked so solid on the outside just crumble to dust so fast? To find the true cause of death, we first have to deconstruct the story everyone was told, what the Brookings Institution actually calls the Lehman myth. Right, so the popular story goes something like this. Lehman's bankruptcy was the one single event that kicked off the entire global crisis, that this was some unforeseen black swan event nobody could have predicted. Now, that story is convenient, for sure, but it is an incomplete diagnosis. It focuses on the symptom, not the actual disease.
You see, the failure wasn't some external event that just happened to Lehman. It was the result of a pre-existing condition. It was an illness that was festering deep inside the firm's operational DNA. To understand it, we have to look inside.
So, let's open the black box. Our investigation is going to start with the firm's own description of what it called its greatest asset, its culture. So in their own words, Lehman celebrated its one-firm culture as the engine of its success, a culture of teamwork, of ownership. But when we apply a risk management framework to that very concept, a completely different picture starts to emerge.
It turns out, one-firm culture can very easily become a synonym for groupthink, a condition where internal alignment gets so strong that it actually suppresses dissenting views and flat-out rejects external challenges. And this is where the pathology really begins.
And right here, we see the critical disconnect. Lehman's stated value was disciplined risk management. But the cultural reality, the one infected by groupthink, it fostered the exact opposite. You had overconfidence in its own models, a refusal to abandon losing bets because of sunk costs, and a clear bias toward individual self-interest over the firm's actual long-term health.
Now, a flawed culture isn't some abstract idea. It's not just a feeling. It always leaves a trail of evidence in the data. The numbers tell the story.
And for this part of the autopsy, we're going to use Lehman's own definitions, taken directly from their 2007 annual report. Let's start with the first metric, leverage. Here, the evidence is just stark. Look, a conservative leverage ratio for an investment bank is somewhere around 12 to 1. At the end of 2007, Lehman's was 30.7 to 1. Now, what does that mean? It means for every single dollar of its own capital, it was borrowing and investing nearly $31. This wasn't disciplined risk management. It was a high-wire act with no safety net.
And this figure, this represents the total value of Lehman's Level 3 assets at the end of fiscal year 2007. This number is absolutely critical because it shows us what they were leveraging so aggressively.
And again, we're using Lehman's own definition. Level 3 assets are the most opaque, the hardest to value. They aren't priced by the market, they're priced by the firm's own internal models, by, and I quote, management's best estimate. This right here is the numerical fingerprint of overconfidence. A 30 to 1 leverage ratio built on a mountain of assets valued by internal belief, not external reality.
The evidence trail, from the public statements to the internal culture all the way to the financial data, well, it leads to an unavoidable conclusion.
The final diagnosis is clear. Lehman Brothers did not die from a sudden market shock. It succumbed to a terminal illness of culture. Its internal operating system, its values, its incentives, its whole decision-making process was simply not designed to handle the reality of the risks it had piled up.
These are the specific pathogens that led to the systemic failure. You had a leadership that projected strength while ignoring weakness. You had incentives that rewarded short-term profit over long-term stability, a deep reliance on opaque assets, and a one-firm culture that shut down the very challenges that could have saved it. So the universal lesson from this autopsy is that a healthy culture needs a practical framework for making decisions. This model, known as the right framework, gives you 5 simple but incredibly powerful questions. It goes beyond just rules and regulations to get at integrity, intent, consequence, and transparency. You could say this is the vaccine against the very disease that killed Lehman.
And that brings us to the final, critical question that every leader has to ask themselves. Because as the autopsy of Lehman Brothers proves, the line between the two, well, it can be a whole lot thinner than anyone imagines.